Do you love movies? So do I. What's up, y'all? It's KB, and I love movies. Inviting you to listen to The Conversation, a film podcast where passion meets perspective and opinion. From the old school to the new, I invite a guest on to discuss the movies that thrill us, challenge us, break our hearts, or even blow our minds. There's always new episodes dropping wherever you get your podcasts. So join the conversation. We don't just watch movies. We love talking about them too. The Conversation with KB Loves Movies, a part of Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
The audio commentary. It's a dying art form, but here at One Track Mind, I, your wonky yet affable host Ryan Luis Rodriguez, analyze film through the prism of these embryonic forms of podcasting, one audio commentary at a time. Masterpieces, crapster pieces, live action, animation, cult classics, films literally no one has ever heard of. No track is too small and no track is too big. Join me and my guests from the entertainment world as we keep these features alive every other Tuesday. Hey, who else is going to discuss Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey one week and Citizen Kane the next? Us. That's who. Sure, you have to put up with my voice, but there's a certain give and take in this industry. That's One Track Mind, part of the Someone's Favorite Productions family, and available wherever you get your podcasts.
Dark Destinations.
These may be end times, night creature. Why would a few more casualties trouble me?
Because their blood will join yours.
A radio drama anthology.
You are wrong.
How you figure? Every merc on Mongo is hunting you down.
Not you. Your partner. He said I didn't have a ray gun.
Full cast performances set in the haunted corners of the globe.
Darkness is coming for you.
That's the fear that haunts me. Sleep! Ah!
Dark Destinations by Father Malone at weirdingwaymedia.com.
Weirding Way Media.
Welcome back, Midnight viewers, to a very special segment of the show. I'm Father Malone, and joining me tonight is a filmmaker, producer, actor who not only was responsible for dozens of features, including the classics He Knows You're Alone and Cameron's Closet, but he also directed 8 episodes of Friday the 13th, the series, 2 episodes of Dark Shadows. Over a long and illustrious career, he's worked with luminaries like John Polito, Kenneth McMillan, Joe Morton, Talia Balsam, Nichelle Nichols, Olivia Hussey, Steve Railsback, Piper Laurie, Eddie Albert, Mel Harris, Chuck McCann, Bobby DeCicco, TJ Castronova. If you know, you know, Midnight viewers. Annabeth Gish, Hector Elizondo. This is ridiculous. Jürgen Prochnow, Ali Sheedy, Meatloaf, Luke Perry, C. Thomas Howell, Tiffany Amber Thiessen, personal favorite of mine, Faye Dunaway. My God, sir, it goes on and on. And while he directed The Clairvoyant, he himself had clairvoyance enough to cast Mr. Tom Hanks in his first theatrical feature. He is a dark side bit of royalty, having directed 4 episodes of the series. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Armand Mastroianni to Midnight Viewing. Welcome, sir.
Hey, what a pleasure to be here.
It is entirely ours. Tell us how, obviously, you were making movies before you got to Darkside. Darkside was your first television series, but what got you? What got you there? What got you into the movies? Where'd you go to school? Where'd you grow up, man?
I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. And I guess I was always fascinated with movies. I remember going to see a film when I was maybe 5 or 6 years old, and I just watched the curtains open and I saw that giant screen. And then all of a sudden, these images on the screen, and I said, wow, that's amazing. Look at that. I want to do that. And I, just on my own, I never studied or went to film school. I kind of I talked my dad into buying me a 8mm camera.
Not even super.
No, not even super. And in those days, it was one of those magazine type cameras that you put it in, shoot 25 feet, take it out, turn it around, put it back in and shoot the other 25 feet, and then send it out to be developed. They'd splice it all into one reel, 50-foot reel. So he kept asking, he kept saying to me, my dad would say, what do you want a camera for? What are you going to do with the camera? I said, well, I want to make movies and stuff. And he goes, movies, what do you mean, of the family? And I was going, oh, yeah. Because, that was not his, not his vocation. He came from Italy with his two brothers, and they founded a jewelry business in New York City, and they were very successful at it. And he had aspirations of me taking over the business. And
naturally,
I worked for him, during the summer vacation and stuff like that. But my heart wasn't in it. Although when I used to go out and sell for him, I used to, sit down and start talking to the buyers. And I'd say, hey, by the way, did you see this movie? Wasn't it amazing the way they told the story? And they, and they'd get so wrapped up into my enthusiasm, they'd order stuff, but they loved the stories I'd tell. And I found that I was a good storyteller too, because when I was in the Boy Scouts, they always picked me to tell a campfire story at night. And then everybody was too scared to leave. They didn't want to go off to their tents alone, and in the middle of the night, I'll never forget this. I heard one guy, Mr. Fleming, who was our scoutmaster, please, I need to go to the bathroom. Come in and come with me. We used to go out and pee in the woods or whatever.
Right.
But,
so terrified was he?
Yeah. I'd create these stories. A lot of them, were stories, you heard, you picked up on, and I'd always embellish them somehow. And then the twig snapped. Heard, and he turned around, and there was something that looked like a person standing there. I'd always... I have very, very vivid imagination, and
you also have an incredible attention to detail. Well, I've been looking at a lot of your stuff over the past few days, and you're very meticulous, actually, in your presentation and your shots.
Yeah, well, I enjoy that because I think the whole experience of making a film is telling a story visually, and if you can say it through a visually. You don't need to say it verbally, and that's how I learned, because when I made these Super 8 or the 8mm films, I used to get my friends together, and I'd come up with some scenes, or I'd write a little story and that I wanted to direct and I wanted to make, and we'd shoot it, and I'd splice it together, and then I'd show it to them, and I'd play music from a tape recorder in the background, and and that evolved into becoming involved in school with the projects and making short little films. And one of them won an award at a festival. And that prompted me to go into another one. And then I did a 16mm film because I formed a club in Brooklyn called the Brooklyn Arts and Cultural Association. They funded us as a film club, and all the kids came to work on films there. And I was able to make a film there, and I made a short film called The Private Worlds of Sophie and Bernie Schwartz. It was sort of a comedy. And this was the first time I was able to use sound and stuff like that. And it was 16mm. And
how old are you at this point?
Well, I was just starting in college. The other ones I had made were in high school.
Right. But this is like an actual short film. You're
20-minute film.
Yeah.
And it really turned out good because I had this concept. I said, I want to tell a story about a middle-aged couple that are really no longer attracted to each other. And they exist in the same household, speak, but not really to each other. They speak at each other. They're like, she's got the curlers in her hair and a bathrobe, and she's making the coffee in the morning, and he's eating his breakfast, getting ready, and he's like an overweight guy, and she's this mousy looking woman, and they, the spark has gone out of their marriage, and they just talk, but they don't talk to each other. They talk at each other. Like she'll say, Stewart's is having a great shoe sale today. I'm going to go there and check them out. I need to. And he goes, yeah, look at this, 9 o'clock tonight, Hangover Square. I got to watch that. I like that movie. Laird Krieger, and that was their existence. Now, once they are separated from each other, my story was that they had to survive somehow, but they created fantasies. So she imagines the gardener in the backyard. So she's looking through the Venetian blinds, and she's looking at the gardener and he takes his shirt off because it's hot, and she's like studying his torso, and she's like, oh. And then the doorbell rings, and all of a sudden it's the delivery boy. This young guy comes in. Hey, Mrs. Schwartz, I got your stuff, and he brings the bags, and she goes, put them on the table there, Jimmy, and as she's going, tell Saul that the last week those vegetables were a little, and as she's speaking, her fantasy takes over, and she suddenly says, Mrs. Schwartz, you're one of the nicest looking women of all of my mom's friends. And he starts opening his shirt a little, and she's going, Jimmy. And he goes, yeah, come over here, Mrs. Schwartz. Give me a hug. I want to hug you. So they had these wild sexual fantasies. And he is on his way to work, and he sees the woman at the fruit stand, and she's playing dun 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 da 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 da. Hey, fresh fruit today. And he goes, not today, I'm late. But in the minute he gets on the elevator, as he's getting off to get on his floor to work, and she's standing there in this Carmen Miranda dress with all the fruit in her hair and everything, and they start to dance together, and they dance off into his office, which becomes something else, and it's a story about that. And ultimately, at the end, the two of them meet at the end of the day, and they've gone through 4 or 5 different fantasies, and they meet at the end of the day, and the music is playing on the radio, and he's clipping his toenails, she's putting new rollers in. And they kind of step backward and looking at each other in the mirror, and they hit each other. And he looks at her, and the music starts taking off with his beautiful waltz. And he takes her in his arms, and he starts dancing with her. And he's dancing, and suddenly he's dancing with his fantasy. And then she's dancing with her fantasy. Then she's dancing, he's there. And it keeps changing until they stop, and they look at each other, and he says, Sophie. She says, Bernie. So they discover each other through their fantasies, and they waltz off. Well, this film got entered into the Fordham University Film Festival. The judge was Otto Preminger.
Good Lord. Okay.
He stops the festival and says, this is the winner, and I want to meet the director. I get a telephone call in Brooklyn, New York. My mom says, Columbia Pictures, Otto Preminger's office is on the phone. They want to speak to you. I said, are you kidding me? And they said, Mr. Preminger would love to meet you. Would you kindly come into Manhattan to the so-and-so? So I did. And I was like, wow, I can't believe this. And I get there, and his attendant, his office person says to me, just a moment, please. He'll be with you in a few moments. He's on the phone. And then I heard the buzzer, and she says, you can go in now. And she opened the door. And there's this beautiful office, and he's sitting naturally against this gigantic window, and he's shaving his bald head with an electric razor, and he goes, come in. Your picture made me laugh and made me cry. It's so beautiful. How did you make this movie? It's so perfect. I said, well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. He says, I am going to make sure everyone sees this movie. He got on the phone in front of me and called Paramount Pictures, United Artists, Columbia Pictures, and another company, I forgot. And I went that day, I brought my film to Columbia Pictures, which was in the building. And when they watched it, they came back to me and said, we love the short, but we don't make shorts. We make features. Why don't you write a script or something, or come up with a script you want to do, bring it to us, and let's see. So that encouraged me to, and then Otto was so generous. What he did, invited me on a Sunday afternoon to his home on Sutton Place. He had about maybe 30 or 40 people there, all from the industry. He had a huge buffet laid out, and he showed my film to them.
Oh my God.
Generous thing I've ever experienced. And it encouraged me to become exactly like that, not the monster that he was called all the time, the screamer and all those things. Because I've experienced this with a number of directors, including Otto Preminger, William Friedkin, Francis Ford Coppola. They were so wonderful and generous to me. So I ended up writing a script called Rapallo and Sons, which was a comedy almost like Moonstruck. And it was way before Moonstruck. This was 1970 something. And I gave it to an actor who lived in the neighborhood. I never met him. I just happened to call him up. See, this kind of, I persevered. I went after people. Like I called Vincent Gardenia and I said, listen, he said, listen, a lot of people send me scripts. I'll read it. I'll let you know. I figured. But 2 weeks later, I get a telephone call. Hello, Armand. This is Vince Gardenia. I loved your script. I laughed so much. It's so wonderful. How do you write this thing? It's so good. Blah, 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 blah. I said, well, I wrote it with a Franciscan monk, Brother Jonathan, he used to write plays for the Ensemble Studio Theater, but he was official Franciscan monk.
Wow.
And we worked together and we wrote this script. Anyway, he says, by the way, I hope you don't mind, I gave it to my agents at the William Morris Agency. They loved it and they want to meet you. And they want to sign the script, want to sign you as a client. I said, are you kidding me?
Hope you don't mind.
Wonderful. So I went up and I met, and I, sure enough, signed with the William Morris Agency. And before I knew it, the picture was set up. At Palomar Pictures, Ivan Passer was going to direct, since I had not directed a feature yet.
Wait, isn't that the whole idea?
Yeah, well,
I mean,
here's what happened. The guy who was breaking the script down for them, George Manassi, their production manager, came to me and said, listen, do you want to make a movie? Because I've got these two guys, these two Broadway producers who have some money. They want to make a horror film. I said, sure, of course. So I went in, met with them. They had seen my shorts, my film shorts. And
I got that.
and so what happened is
So it may have been summertime,
They said, so what's the movie? And I'm going, the movie. He said, the horror film you want to make.
I thought you wanted us.
Yeah. So I started pitching the story that I used to tell at the campfire in the book, and they're eating their lunch and they're like kind of nodding like they've heard this one before. And I swear to God, that moment I said, they're not buying this. They're not buying this. And I said, but then we pull back, and that's on a screen in a movie theater. And there's people sitting in the theater watching this. And the real killer sits there. Oh, they want and that's the beginning of He Knows You're Alone. And I wrote that with my dear friend, Scott Parker, who was also working for his dad in the jewelry business. And we used to meet together and write the story. And we used to come up with what's scary. And I said, look, I don't want to make a gore movie. I want to make a very scary psychological thing, a thriller where it's all implied. But I mean, you might see that knife and all that stuff, kind of like Psycho, because I was very influenced by Hitchcock and even Halloween,
Right.
So,
you weren't ripping entrails out of co-eds. You were
No.
You were making a suspense picture.
I hadn't seen Friday the 13th yet, but there was a lot of talk about that. So we made this film, and it was dirt cheap because they were getting another investor named Sam Arkoff, who used to run AIP Pictures. But he calls the last minute. We're starting pre-production, and he says, I can't do it, fellas. He says, you're gonna, I have to bail on you because I'm involved in two other pictures and I'm not gonna have that. So they said, well, we can't make it, because we were gonna make it like, I think $600,000 or something like that. And I said, no, we'll still do it. We'll make it for $300,000, or, do it for just whatever you have. And they said, you can't, and we'll shoot on Staten Island. And I know people, and my friend knows people. We'll put it all together, guerrilla style. Finally, they said, all right, let's give it a shot. And that's how that happened.
Can I just say that I love how scrappy you were in this situation where you're having, being feted by Otto Preminger, and your film is being shown and you're at every studio, and yet you're on the ground making it happen. I just love that.
I was very, very fortunate. I just had a path that was very open to me, and it just kept. Anyway, the film gets made, and they bring it out to Los Angeles. The two producers bring it out to Los Angeles ahead of the Cannes Film Festival because they were going to go to Cannes to sell the foreign rights. They figured they'd make a few dollars with it. Well, the studios were supposed to wanted to see it because it was still a week before. So they figured, all right, let's invest some money. We'll go out there. So they showed it. The first one to see it was supposed to be 20th Century Fox, but they canceled the screening because they had a conflict. So they said, who's next in line? We don't want to waste a day. MGM. So they brought it to MGM, and MGM loved it. They watched it twice because when they went to pick it up, the picture was just starting again. So they knew something was up because it was a packed house of executives and all the people there. And the guy stood up at the end and said, wow, this movie was fantastic. I loved it. It's scary. Oh, God. Oh, excuse me. Who are you guys in the back? Oh, we're the producers. We're here to pick up the print. Oh, would you please step outside? We'll call you. And they did. And they got a call. And they said, look, we'll buy the film as long as you don't show it to anybody else or put us in any bidding war with this. And they got a fortune for that movie. They got a lot of money up front. And I know that because they didn't pay us that much. And they gave me like, take 7 points. It was the producers. 7 points.
Certainly.
7 points once their $150,000 investment was paid off, or close to $200,000 out of $2 million. You know what the profit was? It was phenomenal. I bought it. I was able to put a down payment on a house.
You're just telling me the American dream over and over.
Yeah. Well,
immigrant father and no formal training, just a love for cinema.
I learned on my own. I was cutting in my own films. I used to splice them together and play with the sound so it would match. And
the first note I wrote about your work when I was watching it this weekend is, this man is a visual storyteller.
Well, I hope so, because that's what I aspire to be.
You are, but it just seems like so many directors are just telling the story and setting up some shots and getting the coverage. And every no matter the media, if it was a theatrical feature, it was an episode of television, and no matter what the genre of television, I noticed jumping from one to one, more often than not, it's what you said before. It's less about dialogue and more about just telling the story. If you don't have to say anything, you don't have to.
Right.
I noticed particularly in the Friday the 13th, where there seemed to be passages that lasted like 6-7 minutes with maybe one word. And I just marveled at that, because
I love that.
So few filmmakers kind of believe in just the power of the moving image. George Miller's out there making, basically silent movies set with sound effects and music these days. He seems the only other guy out there doing it. So I don't know if that's a question. It's just an observation I had about your work that I really admired.
There's a Korean filmmaker who made a film called Morbius. Totally silent. Unbelievable. It's the Oedipus complex, but it's all done between a mother, a father, and a son. And not one word is spoken. Grunts, usually, sound effects and stuff, but nobody opens their mouth and says one word. It's all implied. You don't need a word. There's no subtitles to read. And it's a shocking film, but it's very graphic and but I loved that because it was conveying everything through visuals. And, it's interesting you said that, because the first review I had, which was a very good review on the first TV movie I directed with Michelle Lee and James Ferrantino, was exactly saying that the way, he sets up these shots, they're very visual without having to inform us in any other thing. You get the feeling that she's walking on eggshells. You get the feeling that there's something about to happen, even with the way he frames the tea kettle in the foreground and the steam starts to intensify, or, they picked up on those things. And I feel very happy about that, because that's my ambition, is to tell stories through pictures. So essentially, He Knows You're Alone got sold to MGM. And
one more thing before you continue. The logo for that movie is one of my favorite logos.
Really?
The drawing with the hands coming down to form the H. It's fantastic.
Oh, right. Well, that wasn't my design.
Oh, I know it wasn't. I'm just saying you made a movie and that logo exists and it's awesome.
Well, our original title was either The Uninvited Shriek. I know Tom always used to kid with me. He writes, in fact, he'll write me letters and remembers every single one. I used to try a new title on everybody while we were shooting. And so we released it as Blood Wedding, and a skull with a veil on it. And MGM said, well, we can't do that. And plus there was a famous Garcia Lorca play. So they said their publicity department worked on it. And their head guy came over to me, and a guy named Ira Tell, I'll never forget. And he shows me, he says, here's the name of your movie. He Knows You're Alone. And I say, yeah, who does? Isn't that the tagline? Like,
Right.
the stalker, watch out, he knows you're alone. Oh, yeah. In fact, it played next to another a film called When a Stranger Calls. On the same bill, it said, when a stranger calls, he knows you're alone. You know, it sounded like
Wonderful.
one big movie. So, yeah, we were in Los Angeles and they did this whole promo. They brought us out for interviews and everything, put us up at the Beverly Hills Hotel, first class per diem, which I never heard of. And the next thing I know, I get a telephone call from Warner Brothers saying, William Friedkin wants to meet with you.
Jesus.
Oh my God, the guy who made The Exorcist, French Connection. So I said, how do I get there? And they told me, go over the drive and blah, 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 blah. They rented me a car and everything. I'll never forget this. I go in again. It was like the Otto Preminger thing. I walk in and his assistant said, Billy will be with you in a couple of minutes. He's on the phone. All of a sudden she said, Armand Mastroianni is here. And he goes, okay. And the door opens and he's wearing this white jumpsuit like Hannibal. Like he comes out, he goes, come over here. And he gives me a big hug. He says, your picture scared the shit out of me. He says, that film was so good. How did you make this film? Blah, 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 blah. I said, oh my God. And we sat down and we started talking a little bit. And he hands me a script. He goes, I want you to make this one. And I took the script. It said, The Night of the Full Moon. I went, wow. He says, you'll direct it. And I said, you mean you're not going to direct anymore? He said, no, I'm going to still make films, but I want to produce some films too. And I want to find very interesting filmmakers like you like yourself. And I'm going to do that. I said, fantastic. He says, I'll tell you what, read the script and we'll have dinner tomorrow night. You want to do that? I said, with you, of course. And so imagine getting out of that room with the script in your hand. Are you going to drive all the way over the hill? Of course not. I sat in the car and I started reading and I'm going, oh, okay. Ugh.
Oh, no.
Yeah, this is bad. And then I said, I think it's a psychological test because he gives you a bad script to see if you know what you're doing. So I go home and I did finish it. And I called back and I said, I read the script. And she said, well, Billy's on the phone. He'll get back to you. I've scheduled you guys for dinner tomorrow night at blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. He does call me back, goes, hey, so what'd you think? I said, well, it's pretty bad. Long silence. And he goes, any script can be fixed. And I went, oh, he likes it. Oh, God. So I said, he said, look, are we going to have dinner tomorrow night? I said, yes, definitely. And so he was so nice. I sat there with him and we were ordering and he had his hand up to his face like this. And he's going, what do you want to do? And I go, well, I have some ideas for a film. I want to do a story about New York City. And I want to do that there's a killer loose in New York City, kind of like a Giallo film, Italian. And he goes, huh? And I see a scene in a swimming pool where a guy is all by himself and the lights go out, almost like in Cat People. And suddenly he's yanked down under the water and his ankle is handcuffed to the bottom rung of the ladder so that his face is inches away from, but he can never breathe. And he's trying to pull himself. He's trying to rip his ankle off and blood's coming in the water. And he goes, I love it. I love it. And then I see the woman in a scene later on because I always see these bed sheets flapping at night in the wind. And this woman's running away from the killer and she's pulling the bed sheets like this. And you never know if he's going to appear in front of her or whatever. And so he loved it. And he called my agents at the William Morris Agency the next morning and he set up the whole development of The Killing Hour. And I wrote it again with the one I wrote, Rapallo and Sons, with the Franciscan monk. And we wrote the story and he kept calling and he'd say, I like this scene. I like this scene. He says, but all your victims are men. He says, is this a gay film? I said, no. It's not gay. There's a reason that all these men have to be killed within a certain period of time because they're all involved with an individual who does not want to be exposed. And it turns out that individual is the head of a newscast. He was like, I had Geraldo Rivera in my mind because he was very popular at the time. So Perry King plays this talk show host but very cocky, very brazen, but he's involved in the murder of this girl. And with 4 other men, they decided to do this kinky thing, this kinky night. And they pick up this girl, they hire this girl who's like into all kinds of S&M and stuff like that. But she dies, she's killed while this is happening. And so they throw her body in the river and they leave handcuffs on her. And if there becomes the handcuff killings. But then when he realizes that these people also know who he is and can expose, he's got to go out and continue these murders. And his best friend is a cop who wants to be a comedian, a stand-up comic who does stand-up comic stuff. And that's the story we created.
Very popular at the time, stand-up.
Yeah. And so what we did was we made this film, but Billy, unfortunately, got very sick. He had a heart attack, a major heart attack. Oof. And he said, I'm not able to move forward right now, and I'm not going to be for a long time. But if you're able to get this movie started, this all came through his assistant because he was in the hospital. It's yours. You don't owe me anything except what we paid for development. And I went, holy God. So I called the guys from He Knows You're Alone, who are very wealthy right now. And they said, yeah, sure. We'll do it. So we made The Killing Hour. And then, it continued. I got called from Los Angeles to do a movie called Supernaturals. And then.
Can I just say the swimming pool scene that you mentioned?
Yeah.
It fucking horrified me as a child.
Oh, you saw the film?
I was already trepidatious about getting in a pool, but things like that. And there was another film, I think Ghost Story. They had a swimming pool scene where like there was a sheet of glass had gone over the top of it. The
glass. Yeah.
Like those did me no favors come summertime.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, there are things that leave an indelible mark on you. I mean, like the shower scene in Psycho, Jaws. How many people were afraid of going in the water after that? This dark object underwater with a gigantic mouth that's going to come and grab you. It's like, whoa. So, but I was able to be, I have to say, I think I was blessed to be able to move on from one to another. And while I was in Los Angeles doing the Supernaturals, I got a call from somebody who said, listen, we're putting something together called Distortions, and Olivia Hussey and Edward Albert Jr., all this stuff. We want you to direct it. I said, oh, sure. Yeah. And meanwhile, I'm not in the Directors Guild at this point. So I was able to work, they liked that because they didn't have to go through all the rigmarole and the paperwork of hiring assistant directors and all that stuff. So that led to Cameron's Closet, and then Double Revenge for the. I usually ended up doing a couple of movies for these companies because they liked the way I worked. I was always very respectful of the budget because I realized, hey, it's like sending a kid into a candy store and saying you got $5 to buy candy. You could spend it all on one thing, or you could take your time and spend it on this and this and this. But that's it. You're not getting any more. You're not getting $6 or $8. So I always kept that in mind, and I always said, no matter what I have to do, I have to stay close to this budget. I have to stay right on it, or less if I can, and still make a good movie. And if I have to make shortcuts, or I have to combine things to make things work. So I did, after those couple of films, Double Revenge, Cameron's.
Hello and welcome to Tumbleweeds and TV Cowboys. My name is Hunter. In this podcast, I'll be joined by a different guest each week to discuss a classic Western movie or TV show. I've been a fan of classic Westerns for as long as I can remember, and in recent years, they've become very nostalgic for me. I love the aesthetic, the tropes, and I love seeing different filmmakers' takes on them. At their best, they're incredibly entertaining, rewatchable, and some of my all-time favorite movies are Westerns. We'll mostly focus on Western movies made in Hollywood, but we'll also be covering spaghetti Westerns, and one thing I'm very excited to get into are Western TV shows. I've got some amazing guests coming on the show, film professors, historians, and podcasters. And Tumbleweeds and TV Cowboys is part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network, and many guests on the show will be from other shows on the network. Thanks for listening.
Closet, I started getting calls for, I think it was Tales from the Dark Side. Yeah, Tales from the Dark Side, which was still, again, non-union. So they were able to do it. And we were able to do a couple of Tales from the Dark Side. And what was so nice about it, this is how I learned from other directors. There was a kid on the set who he was from The Office, and he used to make deliveries, and he used to come and just like spend as much time as he could just watching before he had to leave. And I called him over. I said, what do you want to do one day? He said, I'd love to write. I want to make movies too. I said, well, why don't you come and spend a little time on the set? And he goes, can I? Is that all right with you? I said, of course it is. And he did. And we started talking. And he said, I have an idea for one of these. And I said, what kind of, he said, I have an idea about a politician who has to go and make a speech, and he has to go, he goes to this town, and they take his clothes away to be pressed and everything, and everything comes back exaggerated into clown suits and stuff because he's really a buffoon, you know. And I said, okay. And I said, it's got to end like in a circus then, because I want to do like a Fellini thing where you know. And I actually think a car should come to pick him up, and it should be a little tiny clown car, a little red car with a battery operated. And he can't understand. And we got this fabulous Dick Shawn to be in it. This guy was over the top when he realized I was going to take his story. We were going to adapt it. He and I adapted it, and they bought the episode, and we made it. It was called, I think, If the Shoe Fits.
The Shoe Fits, absolutely.
With Dick Shawn, who was terrific. But the first one I did, I think, was Painkiller for them.
Yes.
Kobe and Peggy Cass and Farley Granger.
My God, he's fantastic in the episode.
He's wonderful. And you know what I said to him? He would pivot on the exact word at the same moment, like he'd go, nor would you. You had the chance. And he'd use that same thing. And I stopped, and one day I said to him, Farley, how is it that there's no like variation? He said, oh my God, Armand, we could never do that. In the old studio system, we had to match constantly for the editor, because then if we changed things, it wouldn't, in cutting, they wouldn't be able to cut back to us because I'd be doing something different. I said, yeah, but it's amazing how good you are each time you know, and those were the old trained Hollywood stars, which were, you know, the newer ones that I worked with, like when I did Supernatural, for example. I loved him. Maxwell Caulfield was great, but he would never do the same thing twice. He would never even hit his marks because he wasn't worried about that. He was worried about his moment, you know. So the one thing I also learned was everybody's different, and you're going to work with a lot of different people in this industry, and you're going to have to be able to adapt to all the different personalities that you're working with. Some are going to want to listen to you. Some of them are not going to want you to tell them anything, and some, if you start suggesting too much, are going to tell you to go away. So you got to know who to play and who to befriend and how to, you know. So I learned all that. That was part of my. You see, the blessing. When I say it's a blessing, was that without having gone to school for filmmaking and directing and all that stuff, I learned through the process of doing it. And I always said, when I do a film, I always want you to call the film schools and ask if any kids want to intern on my sets, because I want them to watch and see, because that they're going to learn more watching and experiencing how movies are made and seeing the problems that arise and how they're dealt with. And I would always call the interns over and say, like, okay, did you see now we just set up this shot? Would you have done it any differently? He goes, well, I would have maybe done this, and then okay. I said, but you see what you just did? You added 3 extra shots now. And those three shots are, you know, going to cost you more time to do them. If you combine them into one, you get it all done at once. So
important to have angels, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you've had some in your life, and here you are doling it out as well. But
one of the best experiences for me, I mean, working with Billy Friedkin was phenomenal. And Billy, you know, was even until he passed away recently, but he used to be so kind. He even took my son in when he was signing books at Book Soup. He spent a half hour talking to Paul, my son, about filmmaking and what do you want to do, Paul? And it was just so generous of him.
You know, Friedkin has a reputation for being rather cantankerous and
you know what he tells me?
No fools. But
you know what he said to me? Armand, you know what you do on the first day? I assemble the entire crew, and I find one thing. Everybody's there, and I say, oh, by the way, is this who wears props? Is this your idea of something? And they'll, yes, sir. He goes, you know what? I think that stinks. You're fired. You're off this movie. I'm going to get somebody else. In front of the whole crew. And I said, why? He says, because it sets up who's in charge. And they know immediately from day one. I said, yeah, but Billy, they also come to work each day with their stomach in knots. Whether or not they're going to get fired or not. And he says, doesn't matter. He says, you have to always maintain control. Well, I maintained control on my films, but I didn't do it that way. So I learned another thing too. When I heard they were going to shoot The Godfather on Staten Island, up on the wedding sequences, they had a picture in the newspaper, the Staten Island Advance. I'll never forget this, of a bearded man with a scarf around him, a little heavyset. It said, Director Francis Coppola sets up shots, scouting location here on Longfellow Avenue, photo. I said, I've got to go. So
your Italian American alarm go off like, holy God.
Well,
happening right here.
It wasn't that. It was more of wanting to be around the making of movies. Because when I was working for my dad in Manhattan, a lot of films were being made. I was on the set of Marathon Man.
Wow.
I saw Laurence Olivier, cut that guy's throat. Zell, that woman screaming across the street. I was there when they were shooting that. I was on the set of Midnight Cowboy, same John Schlesinger film, where they're in the subway and John Voight has spilt some ketchup on his pants, and he walks over to one of those little machines where he used to put 5 cents in and get some gum or something, and he just looks at himself in the mirror, and they shot that about 10, 12 times. And I was going like, why do they keep doing this? They're not talking. But anyway. And I used to love just being around the whole environment of movie making, watching the cameras, how they moved them and all that stuff. So when The Godfather happened, I remember I got there and I saw that everything was cordoned off. You couldn't get in, but there were a lot of extras waiting to be bussed up to the location. So I kind of meandered and fit my way into the extras. And when we got off the bus, they had us wait on one side, and I saw this guy, Francis Coppola, walking back and forth, and Gordon Willis was there, and he kept looking at the sky. He says, "No, we can't shoot." And Francis was going, "Why, Gordon? God damn it! We got to shoot this thing. I'm behind you." He was yelling, and I said, "Oh God, oh God." Well, I guess this is the time I got. Let me go up to him. Worst time to him. So he walks away from it like in a huff, and all of a sudden I tapped his arm. I said, "Excuse me, can I ask you a question?" He goes, "Yeah, what?" And he looks at me and I said, "Look, I'm a student. I make films. I make Super 8 and 8 millimeter and 16 millimeter. I started 16, and I just want to learn as much as I can. I want to watch. Is there any way you can let me just hang out here and just watch?" "Yeah, no problem." "Oh, thank you so much." He walks away, and somebody puts their hand on my shoulder. "What are you doing here?" He turns around. "It's okay. He's with me. Come over here." And he used to get me boxed lunches. I'd sit right next to him, right by the camera while he's directing. Remember this scene? Diane Keaton. "I didn't know your father knew Johnny Fontaine." That my father knew him because of it. He's at the camera going like to Diane Keaton. So she goes, "I didn't know your father knew Johnny Fontaine," because it's just on them. No extras in the background, shooting the reverse. Like I'm looking at you right now, that kind of thing. And then later on, when they turned around, they put all the people back there, all the extras. So he kept going, "That's the way you direct. You make faces at them." I got to talk to Marlon Brando, who had earplugs in his ears, and he was drinking Stoli, and he would go around going like, I said, "I saw your film One Eye Jacks and everything. Are you gonna? You like that? Yeah, it's very good, yeah." Because he had this thing in his mouth, and he said, "Is he going to direct another one?" He goes, No more. I'm just going to do this. I'm doing this." And he was fun. He was nice. And he signed something for me, Marlon Brando. And I spoke to all the other people up there, Al Pacino, everybody. It was so much fun. And I was there for 3 days because he kept telling me to come back. Amazing. And I watched, oh my gosh, this was the most incredible thing. I watched the scene where they shot in the garden. So tell me, Michael, this guy who comes to you, this Barzini thing, how's your kid doing, huh? He reads the funny papers. Well, all that is on giant cue cards over Al Pacino's shoulder. And Brando would do something like, he'd go, "Michael, so read the lines, right? And come back to him and say, tell me something." And it looked like he was thinking, it looked like it was beautiful. Even though
the ultimate thing about Marlon Brando, because you hear that story about him putting lines here or having it fed into his ear and stuff, and it just sounds like, oh, he's being lazy and whatever, but there is a method there. Like
he was
super effective.
He was doing it as he wanted that spontaneity. Here is a shot from The Godfather, and look at that. The lines are on Robert Duvall's chest.
Yeah.
There's Brando reading them. I mean, he really did stuff like that. So it was And I took a few pictures and I hid them, But and then I remember Coppola inviting me to Godfather 2, and I met with Robert De Niro and all those when they were shooting the Feast of Saint Rocco.
Yeah, amazing.
And they invited me to the screenings, the 2 premieres, and so he was so nice to me. I said, I want to be just like him. I want to encourage other young people to make films and come up and participate. So I've always done that. Every time I make movies, I've always got young film students and stuff on the set. And, I was very fortunate for, the companies to allow me to do that, because a lot of them would have said, no, we don't want more people. We don't have to feed them. And we have to,
Right.
But, I had fun doing the Tales from the Dark Side, and that led into a few other things,
Well, if I can ask you some specific questions about Tales from the Dark Side. Today is Ernest Dickerson's birthday.
Oh, yeah. I love
Happy birthday, Ernest Dickerson. And now he was your DP on at least two of your episodes.
And I'll never forget, he was laughing so hard when we were filming If the Shoe Fits, because Dick Shawn made us laugh that the camera would jiggle. So you'd have to get away from the camera. And the same thing with the Painkiller. Now, I don't think he shot Painkiller. I think that was somebody different. No, it was at the Shoe Fits, the Dick Shawn one, because I remember him laughing so hard. And I see Ernie once in a while because we get together with the other film directors at Mick Garris holds a thing sometimes. We haven't done it in a while. We like Quentin Tarantino, all these people, Guillermo del Toro, Wes Craven. When
you masters of horror, you.
That's what we were. They called it the Masters of Horror. So we used to get together and do that. But and then I get a. Go ahead. So you asked me.
That's his first gig, and on Tales from the Dark Side. And could you tell me a little bit about this? Involves him, obviously, the house style. Were you dictated a like how and how you can shoot, basically?
No, not so much on that one.
I spoke to Robert Draper, who's one of the DPs on the show.
I worked with Rob. Yeah, he shot a couple of my movies. No, I mean, they did want to be able to cut it for time, because these had to fit into a certain category. So we did have to have a certain amount of coverage. And if somebody started to get too artsy and make long, moving takes that you can't cut out of, then they'd come, like Tommy Castronova would come down, or I shot one in New York. Yeah, the Painkiller was in New York. That was a different DP. But in California, I know TJ, who we became such close friends. In fact, I made his movie Double Revenge. He had a script. He said, Armand, I want you to make this for me. And I brought it to the company who did Cameron's Closet. So
he's in that as well, is he not?
Who?
TJ Castronova.
He passed.
No, was he in the film? I mean,
No. No, we do little walk-ons here and there, but I don't remember him being in any of the shows.
Coincidentally, I co-host another podcast that's about the television series Taxi, which he was a regular on that show for many years. He worked at Mario's there. He was Mario.
He knew Tony and all those guys over there very well. Yeah, a lot of stories with TJ. But
I'd love to hear a few. Just like what is your relationship with him on the show? Like, how are you interacting with him from director?
Oh, we were like buddies. He'd yell at people. Come on, we got to move this thing, guys. We're not doing Gone with the Wind here, And but he never had a problem with me, because I think he requested me. He had seen the Painkiller one that I did with Lou Jacobi, he said, I want this guy. Bring him out. Let's bring him out. And because I was living in New York at the time, I was living in Staten Island. And he was.
So you can I just? I'm sorry to interrupt, but you filmed both on the East and West Coast.
Yeah.
For the show? Okay.
I did the first, because they were shooting in Manhattan. They were shooting and it was Mitchell Galen. No, I think, and somebody else. And of course, who was running George Romero's company there at the time.
Richard Rubenstein.
Richard, of course, Richard. And we did that in New York. And then they saw it in LA and they said, we want this guy out here. And that's really what's happened for me. I mean, even with Tales from the Dark, from Friday the 13th and War of the Worlds, all those things, people would see things that I did, and I want this guy. And I'll never forget. I mean, I became very close friends with John Anderson, who was a Sikh at the time. And he just loved me. He said, I got to get Armand on this one. Armand's got to do this one. Armand. And it was very fortuitous for me, because the actors I would work with would really like me, because I would be very considerate of them. I'd listen to them and I'd give them options and not tell them how. And word spread. And so that's why when it became time to do my first TV movie, the network would not approve me because I was doing feature films at the time, or low, independent feature films. And they said, we needed a guy who knows how to shoot TV.
Right. Which is generally what faster, I mean, overall.
Yeah. Michelle Lee said, I will not do it unless you get this director. And they were so reticent to do it, but they finally bent and they got it, and they were very happy. It turned out to be a huge hit. It's called When No One Would Listen. Originally called My Husband Is Going to Kill Me. And it was based on a true story of a woman who leaves her abusive husband with the kids, and he finds her and ultimately does kill her. And it was,
Yeesh.
But it was an interesting film. And there,
that was James Farentino, right?
James Farentino,
with her,
yeah, very. It was, talk about taking visual chances. This is my first TV movie. I think I should follow the book and follow. No, I told him, I said, I want to do theatrical lighting. Like when she takes the kids to the shelter and we go into this big room and there's all these women on cots with their kids sleeping next to them and everything. And Cecily Tyson takes them through all these things. I want 3 pools of light on the wide shot. And as they leave, let that pool of light diminish slowly. And then the next one they go through, then that one diminishes until finally it's just one pool of light over them. And you know what's in the room, but you don't really get to see it. You're with these 2 kids, the mother and Cecily says, we'll talk in the morning. And then as she comforts the kids, the camera slowly pushes in, and the light fades to black. And that was a theatrical thing you do on a stage. Not in a film, but everybody loved it. They said, this looks really different. It doesn't look like a TV movie. And I did that also with when she gets killed at the end. It's suddenly she looks at the cigarette that she smoked. She's been telling us the story, and you don't know where she is. And she looks and the ashes have gone down, and she reaches out a frame, and you see a little tin, and she just puts it out in the tin, and it cuts back, and she's on a gurney, and her body is laying flat. And there's this big white light over the gurney. And it says Jessica Cochran was killed on such and such a night with bullets to the heart, blah, 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 blah. And then the lights slowly dim, black. And it was...
Take that.
I opened the movie on a black screen. Again, they didn't want to do that, but they loved it because then she lights a match and the glow illuminates her face and she lights a cigarette. This is the opening shot of the film. And she... The first time, she looks right at the camera and starts talking. I think I was 17 or 18 when he hit me, but I thought, boy, he really loves me. Anyway, I met Gary and we start going into the film. And it was like, and you don't know where we are. We're in the morgue. She's telling us that from her table. So I did take a lot of chances, yes. And I do remember a couple of the series that I got on, and I wasn't a fan of doing series because series had established people in it, had kind of looks that had been established and stuff, because I like to bring my own stuff, my own style to it. But there were a couple that said, look, we like to shoot everything with long lenses and that's the style of this series. I said, okay, I'll keep that in mind. And, I kind of did. But the other very interesting thing was the call for Dark Shadows. I was at home.
Let's talk Dark Shadows. I watched that when it was run. I was about 15 years old, and I was glued to my television.
You're talking about the black and white one, the early one?
I had already consumed that. I'm talking about the revival with Ben Cross.
I get a call from Dan Curtis's office. And my wife comes out and says, do you have a call from Dan Curtis wants to speak to you? I said, really? Oh, okay. So I get on, hello. I love Winds of War. You have great film, great show, great meal. Thank you very much. He said, I got to tell you something. I was watching TV the other night. I saw your Friday the 13th, the one you did about the Marquis de Sade. He says,
the Charnel House.
The Charnel Pit, yeah.
Charnel Pit, sorry.
I love the way you shot that with those very low angles and foreground. And he says, that's the way I shoot. I love that. I said, maybe I copied your style. I was influenced by the way you shoot. And he says, I love it. He says, I want you to come out and work on Dark Shadows. You'd be interested? I said, you mean the series you're doing? And he explained to me, yes. So I remember coming out and taking the job, and I did the first two after him because he did the pilot and the first one. Then I did the next two, and he says, I wish I could fire all the other directors because I want you to keep this look going. So what I'd like you to do, I'm not going to let you go home. I want to make you the producer of the show, and you stay on and you control the other directors. I said, Dan, I can't do that. I don't want directors telling me how to shoot. And you teach them, you show them, but reluctantly, and I've always did it with a very nice way because I also knew what he was looking for, and he wanted to keep in the style of the show. But again, I took huge chances there in that one. I did something that, everybody says, and he bites her on the neck. Boom, that was the shot. And I said, this has got to be a very sexual seduction. She has to lure him. He's out there in the garden waiting for her, and she's sleeping, and she can feel him. She can sense him. And she had this very low cut thing, And I said, I want to do a shot where she's walking barefoot through the leaves, and she's moving, and she senses his presence in that distance, and she goes up to him, and they stare at each other, and then she reaches up and opens his shirt, and she rubs her hands on his chest, and then slowly turns her back to him and offers her neck like this, and like she offers, do me. And I said, I want her breasts to be heaving, and the camera will move down. And after he bites, droplet of blood, like an orgasm of blood. And it worked. And in fact, it took the headline of the newspaper. They went nuts. Hold on one second. I got to show you this.
I can't wait.
The newspaper printed this. What newspaper was this? USA Today. It said a very sexy dark shadow, and that's the shot they used.
Awesome. That's fantastic. And I recognize the shot. Yes, I remember. Oh my God.
And
how wonderful.
And I became such good friends with Ben Cross. We used to go to Rosarito Beach on a Friday when we'd wrap, and he'd have margaritas waiting for us, and we'd all have fun. And it was a way to make, and even Barbara Steele, she was always playing everything. So I said, Barbara, I want to do something. I want him to like reach in and undo your hair with his fingernails. I want him to like really just take you apart, and as though he's going to crush your skull. And she says, I love that. Oh, Fellini used to do stuff like that. Well, I just want to try this. And so I remember getting a call from MGM saying that I spent the half a day shooting this one, this particular thing. And it's only a quarter of a page. I should have knocked it off in like an hour. So they said, what the hell's going on there? And I said, well, I'm just trying to do something. And when they watched the dailies, Lynn Loring was there. She says, oh my God, I'm getting so hot watching this. This is so good. And they loved it. And so there was no problem with, telling me to take over the show. And that's what I did. I became a producer on the show and worked with all the other directors who I'm friendly with, because I was never interfering. I always said, look, we got to kind of hold this look through the thing. We got to try to make your shots, try to design stuff that has those foregrounds. And
well, it needs to have a style. I mean, that show in particular is 1000% style. So it only makes sense that somebody should be, minding the rudder. Yeah.
But Dan loved the ideas I brought to it. Because I said, let's bring it up to the 90s. Let's sexualize this show, because it is. The other one, the black and white one, wasn't at all sexy. It was nothing, just boom, boom, boom.
It was just creepy and fun.
Yeah. And I think when I did one of the Friday the 13th, I did a vampire one called
Night Prey.
Yeah. I did this kind of lesbian love scene with these two girls.
Oh my God, it's fantastic.
Yeah. And again, that's a long period of time with no talking. The husband's watching this. It's like, I just love that dichotomy of changing people around and seeing what would, putting like, how would I feel if I saw my wife and some other woman making out? It would be like, what? But would I be morbidly fascinated by it? And erotically charged watching it, So
by the way, I'm watching the show again because I watched all of your Friday the 13th because that's another show I watched when it was airing rather religiously and have not really revisited it until just this past week. And now I'm going to revisit the entire series because I find it remarkable. There's one of the beginnings of your episodes. It's a man, he's driving and he's looking for a prostitute. Again, just visual storytelling.
That was the first one I did. That was called Dead. No, very first episode of Tales. And that is, I ended up doing 8 more because Frank Mancuso Jr. and producer John Anderson said, "Oh my God, look what this guy did!" It's like they loved what I was doing. So and
Better Off Dead, by the way, is the name of the movie.
Better Off Dead, yeah. Neil Monroe, and then his daughter has got this horrible disease that only a prostitute's. And then I came up with the idea that we had to drive this needle all the way through the neck, and that the mother, when they watched that, Frank Mancuso's mother said, "Oh, I can't watch this. I can't watch it." They had this the first time they put a disclaimer at the beginning of the show saying tonight's episode contains, and I like that. I said,
"Oh my God, you should." The thing is, the show was kind of advertised as like aimed for adolescents when as I remember it. And now what I'm getting at is I'm rewatching it. I'm like, my God, this is really subversive. Like, how is he getting all of this on the air? Like,
I know.
You'd hear trouble about it nowadays. Never mind.
You know what? They allowed me to push the boundaries. Even with the Mesmer's bauble, the one with vanity in it.
Yes.
Totally naked in those scenes, and the guy's crawling inside her, and she would walk around butt naked around the set because she said, "I got to be naked. What the hell? Everybody's seen me already, so let's keep going." And
her name is Vanity.
Vanity, yeah, name is Vanity. But she was, that whole idea of came to me, and I worked with Jim Henshaw, who was the writer. I kept saying, "Jim, let's have him want to get inside her." He literally not only wants to become her, he wants to crawl under her skin, which he kind of does at the end, and then it starts to. But of course, we didn't CGI or anything like that in those days. We had to make everything practical, and there was no AI or anything. Everything was done on the set. So, yeah, I think I was very fortunate that they wouldn't do that with other directors, though. I remember that one of the directors wanted to do something, and John said, "Nope. Follow the script." They allowed me to branch out and do stuff. They really did.
You were bringing flair to it and telling the story more efficiently. Like, who cares if it took you a day to shoot that 1/4 page of a script? It's in USA Today, man.
Yeah, that was the headline.
Can I just say, of all the Friday the 13th episodes, Mightier Than the Sword with Colm Fiore, the fountain pen.
Yeah.
I loved that episode.
Yeah, that was a good episode. And my wife
really well done. And what I really love about the show, and a lot of your episodes do this, it sort of shunts the main cast to the side, and you just tell the story.
Yeah, because I shouldn't say this. I mean, I felt like the main cast were the staples that just held the piece together, but the story and how those characters were living through the story, the characters in the story that these guys are investigating, because they had to go and find the cursed object that these characters had. I always found them more fascinating because it was a wild kind of fantasy world that they were existing in, and our guys were like the police coming in to solve the murder. Like, where were you last night? Jack and Roby and John LeMay, which was, what was his name? Ryan. Jack. No, Jack was the old man.
The old man was Jack. That's what I meant. Yeah, Ryan. And yeah.
So I mean, yeah, like those were the kind of fun things, and I really enjoyed the fact that I was able to take such liberties and do stuff. Like even in Mightier Than the Sword, there's an ending is a nightmare. It's a dream. I think she wakes up screaming. Yeah. And
which was wonderful, by the way, because it felt like an aftershock.
That wasn't there. That's something I said to Jim. I said, you know what I want to do here? I want to make this happen, and fool the audience and make it think it's really, but it's her nightmare. She's never going to forget. Yeah. So yeah, that was enjoyable. I used to be very, very aware of shot lists in those days. I used to.
Oh, good. I meant to ask you because it seems like you would have a massive shot list.
And I didn't. Because what happened, they never used them. I never used them. I would sit down and sketch all these things and design shots and say I got 14 shots that I got to do, 15 shots. When you're on the set, everything changed for me. Everything would become like, oh, wait, why don't you go over here? And why don't we go over there with the camera and push this in? And, all that inspiration was happening spontaneous. And so I've never used shot lists after that. I did everything from here.
It is shocking.
Yeah, I know. And I know people meticulously, like, I know Hitchcock does it, but I would find that very boring to then. Once the film is made, then you've made it already. It's all sketched out. What are you drawing now?
I find it actually very, very inspiring that you say that, because I think you can overthink it. You can. I mean, look, unless you're doing animation, there's no reason to not improvise if you're on a set, correct? Like, it just, all these different factors are going to come up: the performance, what the room looks like, how they decorated it.
If you over rehearse your actors too, it's the same thing. They become a little, so used to it that everything, is done by rote, and there's no like spontaneity. And sometimes what I like to do is whisper into the actor's ear something, give them an adjustment or some kind of a choice to make, and not let the other actors know. And I'll shoot that take and see what happens, because sometimes there'll be a surprise that's so wonderful that you get a genuine reaction that wasn't done 5 times already. So I like doing that kind of stuff. And I think that's why the actors liked me. And actors always would recommend me. So when I started doing a lot of the television movies, I had just finished doing a big, epic film called The Ring in Prague and Austria and London and Switzerland, and then we came to New York to shoot. It was all in the 40s, and it was about the World War II. It was Nastasia Kinski, Michael York. It was a huge cast. It was one of my favorite films that I made.
I feel deficient for not having seen it, but I'm going to rectify that as soon as I get out of here.
There we are shooting at the hotel, and there's Michael York in the background. And it's one of my favorite films. It's based on a book by Danielle Steele called The Ring. Danielle Steele's The Ring. And there are parts of it on YouTube. I don't know if there's DVDs floating around. And
I'll find it.
But it is an amazing film, because everybody, I mean, I don't want to say it's an amazing film because I made it, but I loved making it so much, because when I got there, first I was reluctant. I saw Danielle Steele. Oh, this got to be a love story of some sort. I don't want to do it. But it was this thick, the script, because it was 2 nights. It's a 4-hour movie. So 3 hours and something. So I opened the thing and I'm exhausted. I don't want to do this because I just finished a movie, and my agent said, just read it. And it said Berlin, 1933. Hitler is just coming to power. Oh. And I'm reading. I love that period. And
33, I'm in.
Amazing. And I discovered, I don't know if you know the actor Alessandro Nivola.
I do. Yeah. He was just in Many Saints of Newark.
Yes. He is somebody I wanted so desperately to play Nastasia's son, because it moves so many years ahead at the end. And the producer, Doug Kramer, did not want him. He wanted some, I don't know, surfer guy from Los Angeles who was on tape. And I said, I don't like this guy, Doug. I don't. And he said, well, the other guy looks like a ferret. I don't think. I said, what are you kidding? I said, he's wonderful. There's a natural quality about him. But then Doug bowed and he said, you get him, you make him look good. And he was wonderful. Alessandro. Then right after that, Alessandro got to play Pollux in Face Off. He played the brother of Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
And so, and making a film of that stature was a huge effort for me. I mean, we scouted all over the place. There was hundreds of extras. It was all about the Nazis. I had to blow up all these buildings and everything. And it's all in the film. It's a very big budgeted film. So I come back and I'm editing the film, and I can't wait to go back home to Staten Island and my house and everything. And I get a call. My agent says they want to have breakfast with you, these 2 producers that have a project. And I said, no, I'm not going to do anything for a while. I'm going to take a break. So he called them and they said, no, we have to talk to him. Just have breakfast at least. So I said, all right. So I met them and they put a script in front of me called Robin Cook's Virus. And I said, guys, thank you so much, but I really don't. No, we have to make this movie with you. And I said, why? And he said, no, we will. And I'll tell you what, if you make this movie for us, you can go home. We'll bring your family out here. We'll do everything. You can take a break and we guarantee you a second movie right after it. How's that? I said, it sounds great, but I'm just tired. And I said, oh, I'll go read the script. So I called my agent. I said, well, what's up here? Why is this so? He says, well, the actress who is the lead is Nicolette Sheridan, and she won't do the movie unless you do it. And I said, I don't know her. I've never met her. She's all the girls, the women you worked with, all those other movies, they were raving about you to her. And she's got to get you. And she saw some of the stuff and she wanted. So I said, all right. And they paid me a fortune too, a lot more than I was making. And so I made it was like, yeah. So
it was good. I watched it when it aired.
Yeah. I guess your enthusiasm hopefully is put on film too. Your love of making the films. And so, I'll be honest with you, a lot of them were really bad scripts. I mean, a lot of these TV movies were so formulaic and stuff. And I do remember that when I got hired to do Gone But Not Forgotten. It was a big epic miniseries with Brooke Shields, Scott Glenn. There was a lot of people in it. Lou Diamond Phillips. I cast my friend John Polito. There was a lot of people. Chuck McCann. I remember getting up there to Sacramento. They flew me up. I read the script. I said, wait a second. Big holes here, guys. Big holes. And it's based on a famous novel by Philip Margolin. So I said, let me call the writer. So I called the writer up and he says to me, he says, I understand you're making my film, Gone But Not Forgotten. I said, yes, but Philip, I want to talk to you about a couple of these sequences here. And he says, I got to be totally honest with you. I'm way ahead of you guys. I'm on another book. My head isn't in that one. I'm sure you'll figure it out, And so I brought a friend of mine up and we held up the picture for 2 weeks and did a lot of extensive rewriting. And then I got my cast and we started making the movie and I went really dark in this film and I did stuff that was very visual where, the face, and I would push in on the person's face and her eyes would move and she'd have to hold that moment. Everybody would measure that. And then I'd cut to another place where she is in a completely different time and I'd pick up the same shot and pull back. And when they blended it, we put one face over the other. It almost melded right into, became another scene without a cut. And it was beautiful. It was Patty McCormick from The Bad Seed.
Oh, yeah.
And she plays a woman who shoots her husband. And Brooke Shields is an attorney. And Scott Glenn is a psychopathic killer. And boy, there's some very, very, very dark stuff in that movie. A rape. He has women tied in barns that are urine stained, and he goes in and sexually uses them at his pleasure, like he brands
TV movie.
Yeah, it was a musical. It was, but when they saw that, and that's how I started working for that company. And I forgot how many movies, maybe 12, 15, a lot of the miniseries like Nowhere, Final Approach, Pandemic, the RHI, they just gave me like carte blanche, do what you want. You've got free reign. And I did a lot of movies with them, a lot of big miniseries for them.
You've worked with Chuck McCann a lot, including on Tales from the Dark Side. Tell me a little bit about your experiences with Mr. McCann. We're big fans of his.
Wow, we became best friends. We were I used to go and have dinner with him all the time up at the house with him and his wife Betty. And when he used to bring me always to the Playboy Mansion because he was best friends with Hef, and I went there like dozens of times. And in fact, my wife came and for Easter, they had an Easter egg hunt and my son came out and he was seeing this place and all the actors were there and everything. And even Hugh Hefner was really great to talk to. We'd sit down and have some really interesting conversations. But Chuck was always the sweetest guy. I mean, I did The Impressionist with him. I think that was the first thing.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
And then I used him again and again. I used him in Cameron's Closet. I used him in Invasion. That was another big movie I did, 4 hour for NBC with Luke Perry about an alien invasion. It was kind of like Body Snatchers.
Oh, I remember.
Again, a lot of visual style in there that they wanted to fire the cameraman because I said, no, I want this kind of green light to spill onto this. And I want when she steps close, I want her face to slightly have that green cast. And they started calling, what the hell is going on up there? What are you guys shooting? It looks horrible. These colors are weird. I said, intentionally. So they said, look, they flew out. The two producers flew out. This was the guys who hired me for the first one, Virus. And they said, look, we want to fire the DP. I said, well, okay, and then fire me too, because I'm going to go with them. No, what are you talking about? No. We just can't look at this because we don't know if the studios the network will accept this. And I said, let me finish the movie, please. Let me finish. And they loved it when it was finished because it was very eerie. It was very dark and wild.
Why did they keep doubting you? It's so crazy.
No, it's not that they're doubting me. It's they everybody has a protocol. Everybody has a safe place that they exist in. And if they want to get hired again as producers, they fulfill, the wishes of the network. But the network came back to say, hey, this is really good. So they shut up,
Yeah, right.
Everybody knows, and of course, when you're making something that's a little off the path of what's been tested, you become fearful that you might be treading on ground that is not solid anymore and that you're going to fall or you're going to make something terrible. And that, of course, is always the case. And I always worry that, the last film I make is going to be my last because who knows if I'm ever going to get hired again, So, and that's why I ended up doing so many films, because I always felt this is my last one. I bet this is going to be my last one. But it would always work out, and I would be able to somehow take the storyline and change it a little bit. And I'll give you an example. I had a film that I was brought out. It was a huge budget, and I loved the concept, but the story was ridiculous. Here's a guy who's in jail, and he keeps calling his girlfriend, who's free, and he stole a lot of money. Now she has the money. She's holding it for him. But he's telling her, you gotta break me out of jail. You gotta come here and break me. And I said, if that were me, if I was the girlfriend, I'd say, hey, toodaloo, boy, because I got the money. I don't need to put my life at risk. So they said, well, how can you fix this? What can you do? I said, well, let's think for a minute. I said, well, what if he has the money someplace buried out in the desert? And she wants that money as much as he does. So now he's got an advantage. He can lure her. And she gets in the helicopter and puts a gun to the guy's head and says, you fly me into that prison yard and you get that guy free. Now it works,
Oh, so yeah, much better.
Change the story a little, So that's what I enjoy doing that, though, because then it makes me feel like I'm putting my creativity to work.
Let me bring you back to Tales from the Dark Side, your final episode of Tales from the Dark Side, which was Social Climber.
Right. That was with Robert
Romanis.
Romanis, yes.
And Albert Haig and
Talia Balsam.
Oh, isn't she effortless?
She's wonderful.
It's like she's on another plane of existence, acting wise. It's like watching Robert Duvall. It's just like, is there acting involved?
No, some of these people just make it look so effortless.
It's an amazing episode because you get away with an ending with the character dying off screen, and then when we cut to him with all smoking and such, it's wonderful. It doesn't feel like a cheat at all.
Well, I vaguely remember that one. Haven't seen it probably since I made it.
Oh, it's a story of a cobbler, and the kid puts
the young man who teaches him.
Yes, he's got a magic
shoes.
Yeah, like a little magic spike that he puts into each of the shoes.
Yeah,
it was fun.
It was fun. It was. And then there were but this is my experience with all these shows. Like you go on like even War of the Worlds. I ended up doing the last one. I did the last one for Friday the 13th, and Frank Mancuso said, we want to go out in a blast here. So you're going to direct it, and it's the charnel pit, and break the bank on me. I don't care, because they're not going to renew the show. So I remember
I was wondering about that because I was watching the episode and I was like, I can't believe that he got away with like this much production value on this show.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Yeah. And the same thing with War of the Worlds. I did a couple of things there. And one of them was about an 80-year-old woman that gets pregnant and the thing is growing inside her from an alien. And it was like, yeah.
Mr. Mastroianni, you're a master of horror.
Master of horror? No, I don't think so. I think I had a dinner one night with Wes, because Wes and I worked on Nightmare Cafe together. He did too, I did too, and we were always good friends. And he said to me, I really envy you. And I said, you envy me? Why? And he is, because you get to do diversified stuff. You don't always make horror films. And if I make something different, like Music from the Heart, nobody goes to see it. And you get to do movies like The Ring, and then you make a faith-based story, or you did this and you did that, and you did Virus, and then you did an action film, then you did a Western, he said, I would love that. I said, well, you want to switch places?
Mr. George A. Romero used to have the same complaint, that he had been locked into the horror hole, but he always said, like, a good thing I like scare shows. Did you have any interaction with Mr. Romero?
I met him only once. Yeah, no, he wasn't really on the set or anything like that.
Yeah, it's my understanding that he was putting together Day of the Dead. Before I let you go, would you like to tell me anything about some animated Dante shorts that I've been seeing, and I'm looking forward to more upcoming ones?
I did a film called The Celestine Prophecy, which was based on the book, which sold so much stuff. And at the screening at Chinese Theater here in Hollywood, this gentleman came up to me and said, listen, I wanted to meet you. I want to talk to you. I want you to work with me. I want to tell the story of the Divine Comedy. It's my passion. It's this and that. So we've, interacted in the last few years, and he always puts stuff together, and he asks my opinion, or he wants my involvement in it, and somehow, and that's the extent of it. In fact, he actually just spoke to me about an hour ago, before we spoke. He was asking me about, he's working on the opening, and he said, should I use this or that? What do you think? And it's nice to help other people. I feel that it's always, we should collaborate, because that's how we learn from each other. I mean, even I learn every day when I'm making a film. I learn new things. I learn, and every film is different, because I'm working with new team, new actors, new this, new that, and you learn how to work with them. You see who's going to give you trouble, and the ones I was warned against ended up liking me so much. We had such a great relationship. Like, they said, don't make that film with Sybil Shepherd. She's horrible to work with. I met Sybil. There wasn't one moment of tension. She just had me over for dinner. She said, Armand, come over. I'm going to cook. And Michael's coming. She was going out with Michael Bolton at the time. And he came to the set. Oh, no, that was Nicholas Sheridan. That happened. But Sybil, we used to go out. We used to go to movies together and stuff while I was making Mrs. Washington Goes to Smith. And she was the sweetest person. The same with Nicholas Sheridan. They said, she's a monster. Bull, she was so nice. In fact, she was so concerned about this one actor who we hired, who had to play a doctor, and had all his stuff was medical jargon, and he had to get it out fast. And the two of them were looking at each other, and he says, the contract is a little bit, and he was sweating, and she was going, it's okay. And I realized the guy was having tremendous problems. And I said, we can't shoot this. And I know we can't, because he's never going to be comfortable. He's just going to barely eke it out. So I said to them, you know what? What is this moment about? You are getting ready to go in to see one of the victims of the virus. So I want you to play this scene while you're getting dressed. I want the gloves to be being put on. I want you to put your masks on like that. And once his mouth was covered, I was in heaven.
Oh, boom.
And it became a much more interesting scene, because I was photographing their hands tying things, him putting the cap on, she's putting this on, and he's going, and later on he was able to read exactly what he had to say with the right pace, and we just dubbed it in.
Amazing.
So, I mean, I can tell you so many experiences that I've had and so many wonderful moments on the set. I mean, there have been moments where the tension was very, very high too. But most of the times it's when you love something as much as I know I do, you never see flaws in it. You always, it's like, looking at the children, your children are always beautiful. Even some people might say, well, that's not such a good looking kid,
Mr. Mastroianni, you are a visual stylist who's very good with actors, evidently, and we're huge fans of yours at Midnight Viewing. Do you have any projects coming up you want to plug before we head on out?
None that are really going. There's always lots of stuff in the hopper. There's all kinds of projects that we're playing with. I mean, I have a friend of mine from back east who's written a couple of very good scripts. One of them is called The Butterfly. It's a story about a woman who discovers her father was secretly trading illegal stocks in the stock market, and he left all the stuff, and he passes away, and she's cleaning out all the stuff, and she finds all these pieces of information, and she becomes so involved with it. She starts doing the same thing, and it's almost like that movie. Did you see a movie called Emily the Criminal?
Oh yeah.
It's almost like
Aubrey Plaza, right?
Yeah, Aubrey Plaza. And then he also wrote something hilariously funny called Santa Must Die. Very, very funny script. I mean, it's a real slapstick kind of Adam Sandler, almost a Mel Brooks kind of thing. It's way over the top. I love that. And then he wrote something called John the Painter, which I really like. It's based on a true story where this family gets together to tell the story, and they all watch these old films of their dad, and they find out the father was actually involved in a murder of a mafia guy who wanted to kill his son, and he protected his son it's a really good story.
I hope each and every one of those gets made, and I hope you're the one behind the camera.
Well, it would be fun because I'm not retiring ever.
Good. No, we need you in this world. And I just wanted to thank you so much for joining us here tonight on the Midnight Viewing.
My pleasure.
If it's okay with you, we're probably going to hit you up again. I'm going to eventually get a little more in depth with some of your other projects that you've been working on. We'd love to speak to you again.
I will be your guest anytime.
Midnight Viewing, the horror anthology podcast, is a proud member of Weirding Way Media. Our theme song was composed by HP with an assist from Donald Rubenstein and Erica Lindsay. If you want to hear these episodes early and commercial-free, become a patron over at patreon.com/Father Malone. Not only are the episodes up early, but we have extended interviews and bonus podcasts where we spotlight the best episodes of horror anthologies from every series. But if you just like the show and want to help, please share it with your friends and give us a rating on your favorite podcatcher. Together we'll keep journeying through the places that are just as real, but not as brightly lit.
Hello, this is Aaron West. I am the author of the A24 New Wave. In this book, I look at A24's output and I make the argument that we are in a new wave movement right now. A24 plays a major role. This book has a supplemental podcast where each episode is a brief conversation about an A24 related topic, whether an actor, director, or even a genre. As I continue research for the book and conduct interviews, I expect to record podcast episodes with people involved with the company. You can find the podcast at cinejourneys.com or wherever you find podcasts, and we are proud to be members of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.